When David and his wife Rachel first laid eyes on the house at Pinewood Gardens, they knew it was the one. The white picket fence, the perfectly trimmed hedges, the quiet streets lined with oak trees. It looked like something straight out of a magazine. After years of saving and apartment living, they were finally going to own their dream home. David worked as a software developer for a tech company downtown. He spent most of his days behind a computer screen, fixing code and attending virtual meetings. Rachel had a different kind of job. She worked as a security consultant now, but her past was something most people would never guess just by looking at her. She was a former Navy SEAL, one of the few women who had made it through the brutal training program. But she didn't talk about it much. To the neighbors, she just looked like another friendly woman in her 30s who enjoyed morning runs and kept to herself. The moving truck pulled up on a bright Saturday morning in June. David was excited, maybe a little too excited. He kept talking about how great it would be to finally have a garage, a backyard, and neighbors who actually said hello. Rachel smiled and nodded, though something in her gut told her to stay alert. Years of military training had taught her to read environments, and this place felt a little too perfect. They hadn't even finished unloading the first box when a silver BMW pulled up in front of their house. Out stepped a man in his late 50s, wearing pressed khaki pants and a polo shirt that looked like it had been ironed that morning. His hair was gray and slicked back, and he had the kind of smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Welcome to Pinewood Gardens," the man said, extending his hand. "I'm Richard Brennan, president of the Homeowners Association. Thought I'd stop by and introduce myself." David shook his hand enthusiastically. Rachel did the same, but she noticed how firm the man's grip was, like he was trying to prove something. Richard pulled out a thick binder from under his arm and handed it to David. "This is your HOA handbook," Richard said. "Everything you need to know about community rules and regulations. I'd suggest you read it cover to cover. We run a tight ship here, and we expect all residents to maintain our standards." David flipped through the pages. It had to be at least 200 pages long. Rules about lawn height, acceptable paint colors, where to park cars, when to put out trash cans, even what kind of mailbox was allowed. Rachel raised an eyebrow but said nothing. "We have monthly meetings on the first Tuesday of every month," Richard continued. "Attendance is strongly encouraged. Oh, and one more thing. Your lawn looks a bit overgrown. I'll give you a week to get it properly trimmed. After that, you'll receive a violation notice and a fine." Rachel glanced at their lawn. It looked fine to her, maybe an inch or two longer than the neighbor's grass, but nothing outrageous. "Sure, no problem," David said quickly. "We'll take care of it." Richard smiled that cold smile again. "Wonderful, I think you two will fit in just fine here as long as you follow the rules." He walked back to his BMW and drove off. "That was weird," Rachel said. "He's just passionate about the neighborhood," David replied. "Come on, let's get this couch inside." The first week passed without incident. They mowed the lawn, unpacked boxes, and started settling into their new life. A few neighbors stopped by to say hello. Most of them seemed nice enough, though Rachel noticed they all spoke in hushed tones when talking about the HOA. One neighbor, an older woman named Patricia, warned them to just do whatever Richard says. "Trust me," Patricia had whispered, looking over her shoulder. "It's easier that way. He makes life hell for anyone who pushes back." Rachel had wanted to ask more, but Patricia had hurried back to her house like she was afraid of being seen talking too long. On day 8 of living in their new home, Rachel walked out to get the mail and found a bright yellow envelope tucked into their door. She opened it and read the letter inside. It was from the HOA, a violation notice. Apparently, they had left their trash cans out for 37 minutes past the allowed pickup time. The fine was $50. Rachel looked at her watch. She had brought the cans in at 7:37 that morning. The pickup time was 7 o'clock. She hadn't realized there was a 30-minute grace period, and that was it. "David, come look at this," she called out. David read the letter and his face fell. Are they serious? $50 for leaving trash cans out half an hour late? Apparently so. This is ridiculous, David said. But let's just pay it and move on. I don't want to start drama in the first week. Rachel agreed. though part of her wanted to march over to Richard's house and tell him exactly what she thought of his petty rules. But she stayed quiet. For now. 2 days later, another yellow envelope appeared. This time, the violation was for David's car being parked 3 inches over the edge of their driveway line. The fine was $75. Rachel measured it herself with a tape measure. The car was barely over the line, and only because David had pulled in quickly when it was raining. "This is getting out of hand," Rachel said that evening over dinner. "I know," David sighed. "But what can we do? We signed the agreement when we bought the house. We're stuck with the HOA rules. Maybe we should go to one of those meetings. Talk to Richard directly." David nodded. "Good idea. The next meeting is tomorrow night." The HOA meeting was held in the community center, a small building at the entrance of the neighborhood. When David and Rachel walked in, about 20 other residents were already seated in folding chairs. Richard sat at a table in the front, along with 2 other board members. One of them was a large man with a shaved head and a permanent scowl. His name tag read, Derek Walsh, Enforcement Officer. Rachel's eyes lingered on Derek for a moment. Something about him set off alarm bells in her head. The way he sat, the way he looked at people. She had seen that type before. Guys who liked having power over others. The meeting started with budget reports and discussions about repainting the community fence. Then Richard opened the floor for new business. David stood up. "Hi, I'm David Chen. My wife and I just moved in last week. We've already received 2 violation notices, and honestly, they seem a bit excessive. One was for leaving trash cans out 30 minutes late, and the other was for parking slightly over our driveway line. Is there any way we could get some leniency, especially since we're new?" The room went silent. A few neighbors shifted in their seats. Richard's smile disappeared. "Mr. Chen," Richard said slowly, "the rules apply to everyone equally, new or not. If we make exceptions for you, we'd have to make exceptions for everyone, and then this neighborhood would fall apart. Is that what you want?" "No, of course not. I just think—" "You just think you're special," Richard interrupted. "You think the rules don't apply to you. Well, let me make this very clear. They do. And if you continue to violate them, the fines will increase. We can also place a lien on your property if the fines go unpaid. So I suggest you read that handbook very carefully." David sat down, his face red. Rachel put a hand on his arm. She wanted to say something, to stand up and tell Richard exactly where he could shove his handbook. But she held back. Barely. After the meeting, as they walked to their car, another neighbor approached them. A younger guy in his 20s with tired eyes. "Hey, I just wanted to say I'm sorry about what happened in there," he said. "Richard does that to everyone. He got me for having the wrong shade of brown mulch in my flower bed. Cost me $300. A lot of us want to fight back, but he's got connections. Lawyers. Money. It's just not worth it." "Thanks for the heads up," Rachel said. As they drove home, David was quiet. Rachel knew he was upset, embarrassed even. She also knew something else. Richard Brennan was a bully, and bullies only understood one thing. That night, Rachel lay awake in bed, staring at the ceiling. She thought about her years in the military, the missions she had been on, the real dangers she had faced, and now she was being threatened over trash cans and parking lines. It was almost funny. Almost. Through the window, she saw headlights. A car was parked across the street. It sat there for 10 minutes, then drove away slowly. Rachel got up and looked out. It was Derek's truck. He had been watching their house. She climbed back into bed, but sleep didn't come easy. Something told her this was just the beginning. The yellow envelopes kept coming. It seemed like every other day, Rachel or David would find another violation notice stuck to their door. Their mailbox was supposedly 2 inches too far to the left. Their front door wreath wasn't an approved decoration. The trim on their garage door was painted a shade of white that wasn't on the official color list. Each violation came with a fine, and those fines were adding up fast. 3 weeks into living. At Pinewood Gardens, they had racked up over $2,000 in HOA fines. David was stressed. He'd come home from work, check the front door, and let out a sigh of relief when there wasn't a yellow envelope waiting. But the relief never lasted long. Rachel handled it differently. She started documenting everything. Photos of their house, timestamps of when they did yard work, copies of every violation notice. She also started watching Richard and Derek more carefully. The military had taught her to gather intelligence before taking action, and that's exactly what she was doing. One afternoon, while David was at the office, Rachel decided to do some digging. She made a few phone calls to old contacts. Her Navy days. People who knew how to find information that wasn't exactly public. Within a few hours, she had some interesting details about Derek Walsh. Derek had been a cop once, about 15 years ago, but he'd been fired after multiple complaints about excessive force. After that, he'd worked security jobs, bouncing from one company to another. 3 years ago, he'd been arrested for assault during a bar fight. The charges had mysteriously been dropped. No explanation in the public records. Then he'd shown up here as Richard's so-called enforcement officer. Rachel wasn't surprised. She'd known guys like Derek before, men who needed to feel powerful, who got off on intimidating people, and Richard had given him the perfect playground. She also learned something about Richard. He'd been the HOA president for 7 years. Before Pinewood Gardens, he'd run 2 other neighborhood associations. Both of them had ended in lawsuits, residents claiming harassment, financial mismanagement, and abuse of power. Richard had settled both cases out of court and moved on. Now he was here, doing the same thing all over again. Rachel printed everything out and showed David that evening. "This guy is bad news," she said, spreading the papers across their kitchen table. "And Derek is even worse. They're running this neighborhood like their personal kingdom." David rubbed his temples. "So what do? We can't just move. We put everything we had into this house. We don't move," Rachel said firmly. "We fight back. But we need to be smart about it." "Rachel, these guys have lawyers, money." Richard made that pretty clear at the meeting. "I know. But they also have secrets, and people who are tired of being pushed around." She looked at her husband. "Trust me on this, okay? I've dealt with worse than Richard Brennan." David wanted to believe her, but he looked worried. Rachel understood. He wasn't built for confrontation. He solved problems with logic and code, not combat and strategy. But she was. The next morning, Rachel was in the front yard planting flowers. They were bright purple petunias, and they looked beautiful against the dark mulch. She was about halfway done when a truck pulled into her driveway. Derek climbed out holding a clipboard. "Those aren't approved," he said, pointing at the flowers. Rachel stood up, brushing dirt off her knees. "Excuse me? Those flowers. They're not on the approved plant list. Section 12, page 43 of the handbook." Derek's voice was flat, almost bored. "Like he'd done this 100 times before. They're just flowers," Rachel said calmly. "Doesn't matter. Rules are rules. You need to remove them by the end of the day or you'll be fined $500. Rachel looked at him for a long moment. She saw the way he stood, chest puffed out, trying to make himself look bigger. She saw the smirk playing at the corner of his mouth. He was enjoying this. "No," Rachel said. Derek's smirk faded. "What did you say?" "I said no. I'm not removing them. They're flowers. They're not hurting anyone. And frankly, this whole approved plant list thing is ridiculous." Derek took a step closer. He was trying to intimidate her with his size. He was about 6'2" and probably weighed 220. Most people would have backed down. Rachel didn't move an inch. "Listen, lady," Derek said, his voice dropping lower. "I don't think you understand how this works. You follow the rules or you pay the price. And if you keep pushing back, we can make your life here very uncomfortable. Trust me on that." Rachel felt her heartbeat steady. This was familiar territory. She'd been threatened by people far more dangerous than Derek Walsh. Taliban fighters. Enemy combatants who actually wanted to kill her. This guy was nothing. "Are you threatening me?" Rachel asked, her voice calm but cold. "I'm explaining reality to you," Derek said. He was close enough now that she could smell the coffee on his breath. "You and your husband need to learn your place. This is Richard's neighborhood. We do things his way, and if you don't like it, you can leave." "Get off my property," Rachel said, "or what?" Derek laughed. "You gonna call the cops? Go ahead. I know half the department. They're not gonna do anything." Rachel didn't respond. She just looked at him, her face expressionless. It was a look she'd perfected over years of training. The kind of look that said she wasn't afraid. wasn't backing down, and was calculating exactly how much of a threat he posed. Derek seemed to sense something then. A flicker of uncertainty crossed his face, but he covered it with more aggression. "You've got until 5 o'clock, he said, jabbing a finger toward the flowers. "After that, the fine goes up to 1,000. Your choice." He walked back to his truck and drove off, tires squealing slightly. Rachel watched him go, then pulled out her phone. She'd been recording the entire conversation, just in case. That evening, David came home to find the flowers still in the ground. Rachel told him what had happened. "He got right in your face?" David asked, anger rising in his voice. "Yeah, classic intimidation tactics. Guys like him rely on people being too scared to push back. But aren't you worried? I mean, if they can fine us $1,000, let them," Rachel said. "I'm documenting everything. Every violation, every interaction. When the time is right, we'll use it." "When the time is right for what?" Rachel smiled. "You'll see." The fine notice came the next morning. $1,000 for unauthorized plants. Rachel added it to her growing file. She also started talking to other neighbors, carefully feeling them out. Patricia, the older woman who'd warned them on the first day, was terrified of Richard but eventually opened up. She'd been fined over $5,000 in the past year. Her husband had wanted to fight it, but they were both retired and couldn't afford lawyers. A younger couple, Tom and Lisa, had similar stories. Tom had been fined for washing his car in his own driveway. Apparently, it created unsightly water runoff. Lisa had been fined for hanging a wind chime that made too much noise. They were planning to sell their house and move, even though they'd lose money on it. Rachel found at least a dozen families with similar experiences. All of them angry, all of them feeling powerless. Richard and Derek had created a climate of fear, and it was working. But Rachel also found something else. When she started digging into the HOA's financial records, which were technically public information, she noticed some interesting patterns. Large payments to various contractors that didn't have any clear purpose. Landscaping bills that were triple what they should be. Maintenance costs that didn't match up with any actual maintenance being done. She called in another favor from her old Navy connections. A friend who now worked in forensic accounting. He agreed to take a look at the records off the books. 3 days later, he called her back. "Rachel, this is bad," he said. "Like criminal bad. Someone's been skimming money from this HOA for years. Probably hundreds of thousands of dollars. Maybe more. Can you prove it?" "Given time and proper access to bank records, yeah. But you'd need to file an official complaint or lawsuit to get that access." Rachel thanked him and hung up. She now had ammunition, but she needed to be careful about how she used it. Going after Richard directly would put a target on her back. She needed to wait for the right moment. That moment came sooner than she expected. It was a Thursday afternoon. David was away on a business trip, some conference in Seattle that would keep him gone for 3 days. Rachel was home alone, doing her usual workout routine in the backyard. Push-ups, pull-ups on the bar David had installed, some running drills. Staying in shape wasn't just about vanity for her. It was about being ready, always ready. She was in the middle of a set of burpees when she heard the side gate open. She looked up and saw Derek walking into her backyard. He didn't knock, didn't announce himself, just walked right in like he owned the place. Rachel stood up, wiping sweat from her forehead. "This is private property. You need to leave." Derek held up some papers. "Got some documents for you to sign. You've accumulated over $8,000 in fines. Richard wants payment in full or we start the lien process on your house." "You can mail those," Rachel said. "Now leave." Derek didn't move. He just stood there looking at her with that same smirk. But there was something different this time. His eyes were slightly glassy. His movements were a little loose. He'd been drinking. Maybe more than drinking. "You think you're tough, don't you?" Derek said, his words slightly slurred. "You and your husband coming in here thinking you don't have to follow the rules like everyone else. Derek, you need to leave. Right now, or what?" He took a step closer. "You gonna make me?" Rachel's training kicked in automatically. She assessed the situation in an instant. Intoxicated male, probably 220 pounds, blocking her exit to the house. Aggressive posture. Invading personal space. Threat level rising. "Last chance," Rachel said. "Leave or I call the police," Derek laughed. "Go ahead." He pulled out his phone and tossed it on the ground between them. "Call them. I'll wait." Rachel moved toward her phone, which was sitting on the patio table. Derek stepped in front of her, blocking her path. "I don't think so," he said. That's when Rachel knew this wasn't just about HOA violations anymore. This was about something else. Power. Control. Maybe Derek had been planning this, waiting for a moment when she was alone. Or maybe the alcohol had just made him bold and stupid. "Move," Rachel said, her voice hard as steel. Derek reached out and grabbed her arm. "You need to learn some respect." Fit was the wrong move. The last wrong move he'd make today. The moment Derek's hand closed around Rachel's arm, muscle memory took over. Years of training, thousands of hours of drills, all condensed into one fluid motion. She twisted her arm counterclockwise, breaking his grip with minimal effort. Before Derek could even register what happened, Rachel had stepped to his side and used his own momentum against him. 1 second he was standing. The next he was face first against the wooden fence, his arm locked behind his back. It wasn't violent. Rachel didn't hurt him. She didn't have to. She just controlled him, immobilized him with the kind of precision that only comes from elite military training. Derek struggled for a moment, then realized he couldn't move. At all. "You're trespassing on my property," Rachel said calmly, her voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through her system. "You put your hands on me without my consent. That's assault. I'm going to let you go now, and you're going to walk out of my yard and not come back. Do you understand?" Derek grunted something that might have been agreement. Rachel released him and stepped back, creating distance. Derek stumbled forward, caught his balance, and turned around. His face was red, a mixture of anger and humiliation. "You're going to regret that," he said, rubbing his shoulder. "Leave. Now." For a moment, Derek looked like he might try something else, his hands clenched into fists. Rachel saw it and shifted her weight, ready. She didn't want this to escalate further, but if he came at her again, she'd put him down. No question. Something in her expression must have communicated that message clearly. Derek's hands relaxed. He pointed a finger at her, opened his mouth to say something, then thought better of it. He turned and walked out of the yard, slamming the gate behind him. Rachel waited until she heard his truck drive away before she let out a long breath. Her hands were shaking slightly, not from fear, but from the adrenaline dump. She pulled out her phone and checked the security camera she'd mounted on the back porch last week. It had caught everything. Every moment of Derek entering without permission, grabbing her arm, and the subsequent takedown. She downloaded the footage immediately and backed it up to 3 different cloud services. Then she called David. "Hey, how's Seattle?" she asked, keeping her voice light. "Boring conference stuff. How are things there?" Rachel debated telling him what just happened, but decided to wait until he got home. No point in making him worry from 2,000 miles away when there was nothing he could do. "Fine. Just the usual. Miss you. Miss you too. I'll be home Saturday afternoon." After they hung up, Rachel sat on the patio for a while, thinking Derek would be back. She knew that. Men like him didn't handle humiliation well, and now that she'd embarrassed him, he'd want revenge. The question was how far he'd go. She went inside and locked all the doors, something she rarely bothered with during the day. Then she pulled up the HOA handbook on her laptop and started reading through it again, this time looking for anything that might help her case when things inevitably escalated. The rest of Thursday passed quietly. Too quietly. Rachel found herself checking the windows more often than usual, watching for Derek's truck. But he didn't come back that day, or Friday. By Saturday morning, she'd almost convinced herself that maybe he'd learned his lesson. She was wrong. David got home around 3 in the afternoon, full of stories about the conference and excited to be back. Rachel told him what had happened with Derek, showing him the security footage. His face went white. "He grabbed you? In our own backyard?" "Yeah, but I handled it." "Rachel, this is serious. We need to call the police." "And tell them what?" "That the HOA enforcement officer got a little aggressive and I defended myself. They'll take a report maybe, but nothing will come of it." "You heard what Derek said. He knows people in the department. So we just do nothing?" "No, we wait. Derek's going to make another move. Guys like him always do. And when he does, we'll be ready." David didn't like it, but he trusted Rachel's judgment. They spent the rest of Saturday trying to relax, watching a movie, cooking dinner together. But there was a tension in the air, like waiting for a storm that you knew was coming but couldn't see yet. The storm arrived at 6:15 on Saturday evening. Rachel was in the kitchen washing dishes. David was in the living room scrolling through his phone. That's when they heard a vehicle pull into the driveway. Rachel looked out the window and felt her stomach tighten. Derek's truck. And he wasn't alone this time. Richard was with him. "David," Rachel called out. "We've got company." David came to the window and saw them. "What do they want?" "Nothing good." The doorbell rang. Rachel wiped her hands on a dish towel and walked to the front door. David right behind her. She looked through the peephole first. Derek and Richard were standing on the porch, Derek holding a folder of some kind. She opened the door but left the security chain on. "Can I help you?" Rachel asked. "We need to speak with you," Richard said in his cold, professional tone. "It's about a serious matter." "You can speak from there." Richard's jaw tightened. He wasn't used to people not immediately bowing to his authority. "Mrs. Chen, I suggest you open this door and have a civil conversation with us, unless you'd prefer we have this discussion in court." Rachel looked at Derek. His face was neutral, but she could see the anger burning behind his eyes. This wasn't about HOA violations anymore. This was personal for him now. "Give me a second," Rachel said. She closed the door, unhooked the chain, and opened it again. But she didn't invite them in. She stepped out onto the porch instead with David right behind her. "What's this about?" David asked. Richard opened the folder and pulled out several sheets of paper. "This is about the assault that took place on this property 2 days ago. Derek came here on official HOA business and your wife physically attacked him. We have witness statements, medical records from Derek's doctor visit, and we're prepared to file charges unless you agree to our terms." Rachel almost laughed. "He grabbed me. On my own property, after I asked him to leave multiple times. That's not assault. That's self-defense. That's your version of events," Richard said smoothly. "We have a different version. Derek came here to deliver important documents. You became hostile and violent. He had to defend himself." "That's a lie," David said, his voice rising. "Rachel has video proof of what really happened." Derek spoke for the first time. "No cameras were present during the incident. And even if they were, what kind of judge is going to believe that a woman half my size could attack me?" He smirked. "Sounds pretty far-fetched." Rachel understood the play now. They were going to use Derek's size and Rachel's gender against her. Paint her as some crazy woman who attacked a man doing his job. And they'd probably get away with it too if she couldn't prove otherwise. "I want you both to leave my property," Rachel said. "Right now." "Not until we settle this," Richard said. He pulled out another paper. "We're willing to drop all charges and forget this incident ever happened. All you have to do is sign this agreement. You'll pay all outstanding HOA fines in full, plus an additional $10,000 for legal fees and Derek's medical expenses. You'll also agree to follow all HOA rules without question going forward, and you'll publicly apologize to Derek at the next HOA meeting." "You've got to be kidding," David said. "I assure you we're not. This is a generous offer. The alternative is police involvement, a possible criminal record for your wife, and a lawsuit that will cost you far more than $10,000. Not to mention the lien we'll place on your home for unpaid HOA dues." Rachel looked at the paper in Richard's hand. It was extortion, plain and simple, but it was also smart. They'd backed her into a corner where fighting back would be expensive and risky. Most people would just sign and accept their fate, but Rachel wasn't most people. "We're not signing anything," Rachel said, "and I'm going to give you both 5 seconds to get off my porch before I call the police myself." Richard's fake smile disappeared. "You're making a serious mistake." "1," Rachel counted. "You think you're tough?" Derek said, stepping forward. "You think you're some kind of badass because you got lucky once?" 2. "We own this neighborhood," Richard added. "We can make your life a living hell. You'll wish you'd never moved here." 3. Derek's hand moved to his waistband. For a split second, Rachel thought he was going to pull out his phone or wallet, but then she saw the grip, the unmistakable outline of a handgun tucked into his jeans. Her entire body went on alert. Every nerve firing. This had just gone from harassment to a legitimate threat. "Derek, don't," Richard said quickly, noticing Rachel's change in posture. But Derek was too far gone. The humiliation from Thursday, the alcohol he'd probably been drinking to build up courage, the rage that had been simmering for 2 days. It all came together in one stupid, dangerous decision. He pulled the gun, not fully, not aiming it. Just pulled it out enough so Rachel could see it clearly. A threat, a statement of power. His way of saying, "This is how serious we are." "You need to understand something," Derek said, his hand resting on the weapon. This isn't a game. You don't get to disrespect us and walk away. You're going to sign that paper, pay what you owe and learn your place, or things are going to get very difficult for you and your husband. David grabbed Rachel's arm. Let's just go inside. Call the police. This is insane, but Rachel didn't move. Her eyes were locked on Derek's hand. On the gun, her mind was processing everything at lightning speed, distance between them 6 feet. His hand position resting on the grip but not drawn. His body language aggressive but not combat ready. She'd been in situations like this before. Different country, different circumstances, but the same primal dynamic. Someone with a weapon thinking they had all the power. They were always wrong. You need to leave, Rachel said again, her voice perfectly calm. Right now. Derek's face twisted into something ugly. Or what? He pulled the gun all the way out. Time seemed to slow down the moment the gun came out. Rachel's training kicked in like a switch had been flipped. Everything became clear, precise, calculated. She'd been in firefights overseas. She'd disarmed enemy combatants. She'd trained for scenarios exactly like this thousands of times. Derek Walsh, drunk and angry on her front porch, was nowhere near the most dangerous person she'd ever faced. The gun was pointed low, not yet aimed at anyone. Derek was holding it more for intimidation than actual use. That was his first mistake. His second mistake was assuming Rachel would freeze in fear like most people would. His third and final mistake was being too slow. Get inside, Rachel said quietly to David. I'm not leaving you. Get inside. Now. David must have heard something in her voice, some tone that left no room for argument. He backed toward the door. Derek's eyes flicked to David for just a fraction of a second. That was all Rachel needed. She moved like water, fluid and fast. 3 steps closed the distance between them. Her left hand shot out and grabbed Derek's wrist, pushing the gun away from both of them and toward the ground. Her right hand came up and struck his forearm at the pressure point. Derek's grip loosened involuntarily. Before he could even process what was happening, Rachel had twisted the gun out of his hand and stepped back. The weapon now secured in her possession. The whole thing took maybe 2 seconds. Derek stood there, staring at his empty hand like he couldn't understand how it got that way. Richard's face had gone pale. David was frozen in the doorway, mouth open. Rachel kept the gun pointed at the ground, away from everyone. She ejected the magazine with practiced ease, then racked the slide to clear the chamber. A round popped out and clattered on the porch. She caught it before it could roll away. Then she set the gun, magazine, and bullet carefully on the porch railing. You pulled a weapon on me, Rachel said, her voice still eerily calm. On my property. In front of witnesses. That's aggravated assault with a deadly weapon. Do you understand how much trouble you're in right now? Derek's shock was wearing off, replaced by panic. I wasn't going to shoot anyone. I was just what? Threatening me? Intimidating me? It doesn't matter. You drew a weapon. That's a felony. Richard had recovered his composure somewhat. Now let's all just calm down. I'm sure we can resolve this without involving the authorities. Derek was clearly defending himself from your earlier attack. There's video, Rachel said. Of everything. Thursday when he grabbed me, and of right now. This whole conversation, him pulling a gun while making threats, all recorded. Richard's face went even paler. You're bluffing. Rachel pointed to the small camera mounted above the front door. Then another one positioned at the corner of the house. I installed these last week. High definition, audio and video, already backed up to cloud storage. So even if you somehow destroyed my local copies, the evidence is safe. Derek looked like he might throw up. I didn't mean, I wasn't going to. Doesn't matter what you meant, Rachel said. What matters is what you did. And what you did was commit multiple felonies. Richard was calculating now. She could see it in his eyes. He was trying to figure out how to spin this, how to minimize the damage. Perhaps we can come to an arrangement. You delete the videos, we forget the HOA fines, everyone walks away clean. No, Rachel said simply. Be reasonable. Derek made a mistake, yes, but a mistake is leaving your turn signal on. This was assault with a deadly weapon. I'm calling the police now. She pulled out her phone. Derek took a step forward, hands up. Wait, please. I have kids. If I get arrested, I'll lose my job. I'll go to prison, please. Rachel paused. For a moment, just a moment, she felt a flicker of sympathy. Then she remembered him grabbing her arm, threatening her. Coming to her home with a gun, the sympathy vanished. You should have thought about your kids before you pulled a gun on someone. She dialed 911. The operator answered on the second ring. 911, what's your emergency? I need police at 23 Oakwood Drive in Pinewood Gardens. A man just pulled a gun on me and my husband. The situation is under control now, but I need officers here immediately. Are you injured? Is the person with the gun still there? No injuries. Yes, he's still here. I've disarmed him. The weapon is secured. Ma'am, stay on the line. Officers are on the way. ETA 4 minutes. Richard made one last attempt. You're making a huge mistake. Derek has friends in the police department. They're not going to believe your story. Then I guess we'll see, Rachel said. David came out onto the porch standing next to Rachel. You okay? He asked quietly. Yeah, you? Honestly? That was the most terrifying and amazing thing I've ever seen. Despite everything, Rachel almost smiled. The operator was asking her questions, getting details about what happened. Rachel answered calmly, professionally, giving a clear timeline of events. Derek and Richard stood there like statues, probably trying to figure out if they should run, but Rachel had positioned herself between them and their car. And they knew, somehow they knew, that trying to get past her would be a very bad idea. The police arrived in 3.5 minutes. 2 patrol cars, lights flashing but no sirens. 4 officers got out. Rachel recognized the first one immediately. Officer Thompson. He'd come to their house a month ago when Rachel had called about a suspicious car in the neighborhood. He'd been polite, professional, thorough. Ma'am, Officer Thompson said, approaching the porch. His hand was resting on his service weapon, not drawing it, but ready. I understand there was an incident involving a firearm? Yes, sir, Rachel said. She very carefully held up her phone. I'm going to set this down on the railing, then I'm going to step away from the weapon. It's unloaded, magazine and cleared round are next to it. Appreciated, Rachel did exactly what she said she'd do. Slow, deliberate movements. The other officers had their eyes on Derek and Richard. Can you tell me what happened? Officer Thompson asked. Rachel gave him the shortest version she could. Derek and Richard came to her house. Derek pulled a gun. She disarmed him. The whole thing was on video. She had footage from earlier in the week of Derek trespassing and assaulting her. Officer Thompson looked at Derek. That true? Derek started to say something, but Richard cut him off. Officer, I'm Richard Brennan, president of the Pinewood Gardens HOA. This is all a misunderstanding. Derek is our enforcement officer and he was here on official business. Mrs. Chen became aggressive and Derek felt threatened. Did you pull a weapon? Officer Thompson asked Derek directly. Derek's mouth opened and closed. Yes, but I didn't mean to. Do you have a permit to carry concealed? Yes, but it's at home. I forgot to bring it with me. So you're carrying without your permit on your person? Derek's face went red. I usually have it in my wallet, but I changed pants and… Sir, I'm going to need you to turn around and place your hands behind your back. What? You're arresting me. Yes, sir. For aggravated assault with a deadly weapon, you have the right to remain silent. As Officer Thompson read Derek his rights and cuffed him, another officer was collecting the gun, magazine, and bullet from the railing. A third officer was talking to David, getting his statement. The fourth was asking Rachel about the security cameras. We're going to need copies of that footage, the officer said. Of course. I can email it to you right now if you give me an address. That would be great. Rachel pulled up the cloud storage on her phone and started sending the files. While she did, Officer Thompson finished with Derek and turned his attention to Richard. Were you involved in this incident, sir? I was present, but I didn't do anything, Richard said quickly. I tried to stop Derek, actually. This whole thing got out of hand. He's lying, Rachel said, looking up from her phone. The video will show he was complicit. He helped Derek corner us, made threats about lawsuits and liens on our house. He knew Derek had a gun and didn't try to stop him until I disarmed Derek. Is that true? Officer Thompson asked Richard. No, I was trying to de-escalate the situation. We'll see what the video shows, the officer said. But right now I need you to come down to the station and give a statement. Am I under arrest? Not at this time, but you're a witness to a serious crime and we need your full cooperation. Richard looked like he wanted to argue, but he must have realized that wouldn't help him. Fine, I'll follow you down. No, sir. You'll ride with us. Richard's face went through several shades of color. Rachel suspected he was realizing just how serious this had become. Officer Thompson turned back to Rachel and David. You two okay? Do you need medical attention? We're fine, David said. Okay. We'll need you both to come down to the station as well, give formal statements. Can you do that tonight? Yes, Rachel said. Good. Follow us down. Shouldn't take more than an hour or two. As the officers were loading Derek into one patrol, Carr and Richard into another, Officer Thompson came back over to Rachel. He spoke quietly. Ma'am, I have to ask, that disarm you did, where'd you learn that? Rachel met his eyes. I served in the Navy. Special operations. Understanding dawned on Thompson's face. SEAL? Rachel nodded. Well, Thompson said with a slight smile. That explains a lot. Most people would have frozen or panicked. You handled that situation perfectly. Textbook even. Thank you, officer. No, thank you. Guys like Derek have been causing problems in this area for a while. Maybe now we'll finally be able to do something about it. After the police cars pulled away, Rachel and David stood on their porch for a moment. The adrenaline was starting to wear off, and Rachel felt suddenly exhausted. Are you really okay? David asked. Yeah. You? I don't even know what I am right now. That was insane. He could have shot you. But he didn't. And now he's going to prison. David pulled Rachel into a hug. I'm glad you're okay. And I'm really glad you know how to do all that crazy military stuff. Rachel laughed, some of the tension releasing. Me too. They went inside to get ready to go to the police station. Rachel's phone was already blowing up with texts from neighbors who'd seen the police cars. The word was spreading fast. By tomorrow, the whole neighborhood would know what happened. Good, Rachel thought. Let them know. Let them know that Richard and Derek's reign of terror was over. At the police station, Rachel and David spent 2 hours giving detailed statements. The detective assigned to the case was impressed with Rachel's preparation. She had dates, times, photos, videos, everything organized and backed up. She even had the financial records showing potential HOA embezzlement. This is one of the most well-documented cases I've seen, the detective said. Usually we have to piece things together from fuzzy memories and partial evidence. You've got everything. Old habits, Rachel said with a shrug. The detective smiled. Good habits. With this evidence, Derek is looking at multiple felony charges. Aggravated assault, possibly unlawful carry, terroristic threats. He'll be lucky if he gets less than 10 years. Time seemed to slow down the moment the gun came out. Rachel's training kicked in like a switch had been flipped. Everything became clear, precise, calculated. She'd been in firefights overseas. She'd disarmed enemy combatants. She'd trained for scenarios exactly like this thousands of times. Derek Walsh, drunk and angry on her front porch, was nowhere near the most dangerous person she'd ever faced. The gun was pointed low, not yet aimed at anyone. Derek was holding it more for intimidation than actual use. That was his first mistake. His second mistake was assuming Rachel would freeze in fear like most people would. His third and final mistake was being too slow. Get inside, Rachel said quietly to David. I'm not leaving you. Get inside. Now. David must have heard something. In her voice, some tone that left no room for argument. He backed toward the door. Derek's eyes flicked to David for just a fraction of a second. That was all Rachel needed. She moved like water, fluid and fast. 3 steps closed the distance between them. Her left hand shot out and grabbed Derek's wrist, pushing the gun away from both of them and toward the ground. Her right hand came up and struck his forearm at the pressure point. Derek's grip loosened involuntarily. Before he could even process what was happening, Rachel had twisted the gun out of his hand and stepped back. The weapon now secured in her possession. The whole thing took maybe 2 seconds. Derek stood there staring at his empty hand like he couldn't understand how it got that way. Richard's face had gone pale. David was frozen in the doorway, mouth open. Rachel kept the gun pointed at the ground, away from everyone. She ejected the magazine with practiced ease, then racked the slide to clear the chamber. A round popped out and clattered on the porch. She caught it before it could roll away. Then she set the gun, magazine, and bullet carefully on the porch railing. You pulled a weapon on me, Rachel said, her voice still eerily calm. On my property, in front of witnesses. That's aggravated assault with a deadly weapon. Do you understand how much trouble you're in right now? Derek's shock was wearing off, replaced by panic. I wasn't going to shoot anyone. I was just what? Threatening me? Intimidating me? It doesn't matter. You drew a weapon. That's a felony. Richard had recovered his composure somewhat. Now let's all just calm down. I'm sure we can resolve this without involving the authorities. Derek was clearly defending himself from your earlier attack. There's video, Rachel said, of everything. Thursday when he grabbed me, and of right now, this whole conversation. Him pulling a gun while making threats, all recorded. Richard's face went even paler. You're bluffing, Rachel pointed to the small camera mounted above the front door. Then another one positioned at the corner of the house. I installed these last week. High definition, audio and video, already backed up to cloud storage, so even if you somehow destroyed my local copies, the evidence is safe. Derek looked like he might throw up. I didn't mean I wasn't going to. Doesn't matter what you meant, Rachel said. What matters is what you did. And what you did was commit multiple felonies. Richard was calculating now. She could see it in his eyes. He was trying to figure out how to spin this, how to minimize the damage. Perhaps we can come to an arrangement. You delete the videos, we forget the HOA fines, everyone walks away clean. No, Rachel said simply. Be reasonable. Derek made a mistake, yes, but a mistake is leaving your turn signal on. This was assault with a deadly weapon. I'm calling the police now. She pulled out her phone. Derek took a step forward, hands up. Wait, please. I have kids. If I get arrested, I'll lose my job. I'll go to prison. Please. Rachel paused. For a moment, just a moment, she felt a flicker of sympathy. Then she remembered him grabbing her arm, threatening her, coming to her home with a gun. The sympathy vanished. You should have thought about your kids before you pulled a gun on someone. She dialed 911. The operator answered on the second ring. 911, what's your emergency? I need police at 23 Oakwood Drive in Pinewood Gardens. A man just pulled a gun on me and my husband. The situation is under control now, but I need officers here immediately. Are you injured? Is the person with the gun still there? No injuries. Yes, he's still here. I've disarmed him. The weapon is secured. Ma'am, stay on the line. Officers are on the way. ETA 4 minutes. Richard made one last attempt. You're making a huge mistake. Derek has friends in the police department. They're not going to believe your story. Then I guess we'll see, Rachel said. David came out onto the porch standing next to Rachel. You okay? He asked quietly. Yeah. You? Honestly? That was the most terrifying and amazing thing I've ever seen. Despite everything, Rachel almost smiled. The operator was asking her questions, getting details about what happened. Rachel answered calmly, professionally, giving a clear timeline of events. Derek and Richard stood there like statues, probably trying to figure out if they should run. But Rachel had positioned herself between them and their car, and they knew, somehow they knew, that trying to get past her would be a very bad idea. The police arrived in 3.5 minutes. 2 patrol cars, lights flashing but no sirens. 4 officers got out. Rachel recognized the first one immediately. Officer Thompson. He'd come to their house a month ago when Rachel had called about a suspicious car in the neighborhood. He'd been polite, professional, thorough. Ma'am, Officer Thompson said, approaching the porch. His hand was resting on his service weapon, not drawing it but ready. I understand there was an incident involving a firearm. Yes, sir, Rachel said. She very carefully held up her phone. I'm going to set this down on the railing, then I'm going to step away from the weapon. It's unloaded. Magazine and cleared round are next to it. Appreciated. Rachel did exactly what she said she'd do. Slow, deliberate movements. The other officers had their eyes on Derek and Richard. Can you tell me what happened? Officer Thompson asked. Rachel gave him the shortest version she could. Derek and Richard came to her house. Derek pulled a gun. She disarmed him. The whole thing was on video. She had footage from earlier in the week of Derek trespassing and assaulting her. Officer Thompson looked at Derek. That true? Derek started to say something, but Richard cut him off. "Officer, I'm Richard Brennan, president of the Pinewood Gardens HOA. This is all a misunderstanding. Derek is our enforcement officer, and he was here on official business." Mrs. Chen became aggressive, and Derek felt threatened. "Did you pull a weapon?" Officer Thompson asked Derek directly. Derek's mouth opened and closed. Yes, but I didn't mean to." "Do you have a permit to carry concealed?" "Yes, but it's at home. I forgot to bring it with me." "So you're carrying without your permit on your person?" Derek's face went red. "I usually have it in my wallet, but I changed pants and—" "Sir, I'm going to need you to turn around and place your hands behind your back." "What, you're arresting me?" "Yes, sir. For aggravated assault with a deadly weapon, you have the right to remain silent."